Hey, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome. My name is Maddie, and today I'll be doing part 2 of my March wrap-up. I did part 1 yesterday, so if you haven't seen that yet, I will leave it linked in the description box, so you can check that out first, which I'd recommend for you to, just so you can get the complete wrap-up, but of course, you don't have to. You can just watch this one if you want. Now I'm just going to continue off where I left off yesterday with the books that I have yet to mention. So let's just get right into it. The first one is Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Kleypas. This one is a historical romance. This is the first historical romance that I ever attempted reading, so it was a pretty new experience for me. This one is about a woman named Annabelle, and she is looking for a future husband along with 4 other single women. She has her heart set on marrying into wealth since her and her family is really poor, but there is one man named Simon in her way because he is pursuing her. Now, because this is the first historical romance I had ever read, I was really hoping to like it so that I'd end up liking the genre, but I really didn't love this one. I had some major problems with it. The biggest thing I had a problem with is the main character, Annabelle, is like 25 years old, but she, no joke, acts like she's like 12. She is so immature. She acted so young that at times I forgot I was reading an adult book. Like, I thought I was reading a young adult book because that's how immature she was. She would whine. She would do just these childish things that you wouldn't think a 20-something-year-old woman would do. It just didn't make sense. So I really didn't like that. Like, if I was reading that in a young adult book, that type of character, that's fine, but not in an adult book where the main character acts like she's a teen, even younger than a teen, like a preteen. It's just weird. And I also felt like the plot really dragged. It was super slow. It just took forever to get into the actual romance, and I got really bored throughout it. So this one was disappointing. I thought the premise sounded good, but it did not deliver well. However, I will still give historical romance books a try. I want to give at least 2 more books in this genre a chance because I don't want to give up on this genre. Just because I didn't find one historical romance good, that doesn't mean like the whole genre is possibly bad. I'm not going to base it off of one book. So I will still give this genre a try, but this one did not work for me. I gave it 2 stars. Next, I listened to another book from the Read Me Romance podcast, which I mentioned in my part 1 of my wrap-up, that this is a podcast that offers free audiobooks to listen to. They're all romance, erotica-based audiobooks, so if you're into that sort of thing, I would highly recommend to check out this podcast. I will leave it linked in the description box if you are interested. Anyway, so the one that I listened to is Fake Love by Claire Contreras. This one is about a fake romance that turns into a real romance. It's pretty cliche in that way. It handles this trope in a very typical way. I initially gave this one 4 stars because I did really enjoy it, but like a few days later, or at least a week later, I forgot completely what this book was about. Like, I still don't even remember what this was about. Like, I feel like I spaced out while reading this. I just remember enjoying it, but I don't remember it. So because of that, I gave it 3 stars. Because if I couldn't remember the story, that meant that it wasn't as good as I thought it was. But I do remember I liked the romance. I just can't remember what this one is about. So I'm going to leave that at that. And then I listened to another audiobook from this podcast, and that is Heavy Equipment by Skye Warren, and I really enjoyed this one. This one is about a woman named June who is given to this guy named Asher by her father, and in exchange Asher will pay her father enough to where he can save his construction business. So it is very, very dark. June is treated as his slave, but over time, eventually, she develops some feelings towards him. Yeah, that premise. It sounds really dark, kind of problematic, but yeah, I still loved it, and I kind of feel bad for loving it, but it was just handled so well. I really bought June's growing feelings towards Asher. I found them to be pretty realistic, and she did have conflicting feelings towards him because she knows that she is being treated as his slave, yet at the same time she's so sympathetic towards him because there are things that go into his character that have happened in his past that she feels really bad about. So she sympathizes with him, but also recognizes that what he's doing is terrible. And I too found myself sympathizing with Asher, and I think that's the main reason why I like this book. I love books that can take a very problematic character but still make me care for them in some way, and the sexy scenes were so hot. They were done so well, so I actually did really like this one. Though it is more of just a really bad guilty pleasure, I still liked it, but just be wary that I don't think a lot of people will like this one because it is so disturbing and dark, but I still liked it. And this is the first audiobook from this podcast that I gave 5 out of 5 stars, so that's saying something. I really love this one. Too bad I can't say the same for the next one I'm going to mention, which is also from the podcast. That is Red Hot Winter by Kay Webster. This one is about this guy's wife who leaves him for his daughter's best friend's father. And his ex-wife's new husband sends his daughter to live with him because she is not getting along with her new stepmother. And so a relationship develops between her and this guy. I love taboo stories. I've said that so many times. I truly do love them, and I also do love age gap stories, but this one was no. It was so creepy. I love taboo and age gap relationships when they're based on love, but with this one, the guy only sexualizes the girl. Like, when he first sees her, he's immediately commenting on her appearance and just saying such nasty things about her. And this girl is 18. She is barely legal, and she is also his daughter's best friend, and they're doing things behind his daughter's back, and that's just terrible. It makes them come off as terrible people to betray her friend and his daughter like that. And the fact that he just sexualized this 18-year-old girl all the time was just way too creepy. I also did not like the guy at all. He was just a major asshole throughout the whole story. And at the end, he proclaims his love for her, but I don't understand it because the whole time he's only saying just these dirty things about her. It seems like he's more only in lust and not in love, but then he tells her he loves her at the end. It didn't make any sense. I really didn't like this one, and actually so far this is my least favorite audiobook on this podcast. I found it so disgusting, just gross. It creeped me out so much. Again, I love age gap and taboo romances, but not when the oldest one in the romance is sexualizing the younger person. Is just so creepy. I did not like that. And another one I listened to from the podcast, because you can tell was binge reading or binge listening to these audiobooks because I read a lot in a row, and that is Swipe by Kennedy Ryan. This is another one I really enjoyed. It is about this woman named Miko whose husband and famous author has died. 2 years later, she comes back into contact with his editor, Adam, and they had always had this interest in each other. They'd always had this attraction, and finally they start to act on it. The only thing I didn't like about this audiobook is that towards the ending, Miko does something that felt kind of disrespectful to her husband, and I didn't like. So I didn't like that part, but that was the only thing I didn't like about this story. What I loved is how this one tackled grief and how the grief topic was handled in such a positive way. I thought it was considerate of Miko to have waited a few years after her husband's death before moving on to another relationship because she didn't want to disrespect the relationship she had with her husband, and also that way she had plenty of time to grieve. And I also did love the romance. It was sweet, it was supportive. I liked how Adam was really there for Miko when she is still grieving. It was just really sweet. So I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read This Is Where It Ends by Mariki Nijkamp. This one is a YA contemporary thriller that takes place in a single day, which is really cool. And it is the first day of school, and the students are just leaving the auditorium after an assembly when they come to find out that all of the doors are locked and someone just starts shooting a gun. This one is in the point of view of 4 characters, telling the story of their survival throughout the school shooting. It is very dark, very disturbing, and sad because this one does tackle the topic of school shootings. So going into it, I didn't expect a happy read. It was definitely depressing, but I really enjoyed it. Only thing I didn't like is that there were a lot of repetitive scenes, and because of that, I think this book would have been better as a novella or a short story because so many of the scenes kind of repeated themselves, so the pacing was a little weird. But I still loved so many parts of this book. I thought the school shooting was pretty accurately portrayed. Of course, I've never been in a school shooting, so I can't say how accurate it is, but it felt real to me, and I did feel really connected to these characters. Each of them are so different, they have different backstories, and they all handled the shooting in such different ways. By the end, though, I was really depressed when I finished this book because school shootings are so real. They happen so much. We see them on the news all the time, which is just so unfortunate. So because this situation is so real, reading this book was really hard and kind of sad, but it was still well done, and I particularly really loved the writing. Marieke Nijkamp's writing is just stunning, and so I really want to pick up more books from her. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and if you can handle the subject matter, I would highly recommend to give it a try. Next, I have Whatever Life Throws at You by Julie Cross. This one was a major disappointment. So this one is about a girl named Annie who moves to Kansas City when her father gets a job there as a baseball coach. She meets Jason, who is a rising baseball star who is also being coached by her father, and they develop a romance that is pretty forbidden because this guy is being coached by her father. So it's a really difficult kind of situation. I wanted to love this one so much. The premise sounded really good, so I had high hopes for this one, but the main character, Annie, is one of the worst heroines I have ever read. She is terrible. She is one of those girls that whenever another girl is near the guy she likes, she judges them so much. She stereotypes them, calls them sluts. There's so much slut shaming in this book, and I did not appreciate that. It made me hate her so much. And in the beginning, I actually really liked her, and I liked where the story was going, but then once you get to know her, you just find that she's just a terrible person. I don't understand why she was so judgmental all the time. And I did DNF this one. I did not finish it. I read it halfway through, and I still count my books as read if I read half of them because I don't like wasting my time, so I still count them as read. It's kind of cheating, but that's how it makes me feel better. That's how I work. So I didn't read this one in the entire way because I could not stand this girl anymore. She was irritating me so bad. So this one was a major disappointment. I had really been interested in this book, and I've heard great things about this author, but it didn't work for me, so maybe I'll give another one of this author's books a chance, but this one was just a huge disappointment, and I gave it 1 star. Next, I caught myself that time, I didn't say read. I listened to Breath of Fire by Catherine Nolan. That is part of the Read Me Romance podcast. This one so far is my favorite audiobook I've listened to from this podcast. It was so good. This one is about a guy named Sage who owns a yoga studio, and he's also a yoga instructor. His high school sweetheart and his ex-girlfriend Olivia joins his class, and some feelings start to rise again between them. For such a short story, this romance was developed so well. I really felt the connection between these two characters. For a second chance romance, it really went into their backstory of how their relationship was before they broke up. I appreciate that because with so many second chance romances, we sometimes don't get a taste of what the relationship was when they were initially together, but this one actually went into that, so I like that. I love their conversations. They had just such great banter between each other, and these sexy scenes were well done, but They were also so cheesy, but like in the best way. Like they made me smile, they were that cheesy. They were just kind of fun to listen to, but at the same time, they were still pretty sexy. So I really love this one. If you do check out this podcast, this is one that I would recommend to listen to because I personally loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to Bombshell by Jen Frederick. I had not noticed it before, but I have actually read something from Jen Frederick, and that is Paper Princess. That is by Erin Watt, but she co-writes that book with Elle Kennedy. And at first I was like, why does the name Jen Frederick sound so familiar? Like, have I read from her before? Turns out I have, because she is part of the Erin Watt duo, so that was really cool. So I had one author from this podcast that I had actually read before. So Bombshell is about this guy that comes back into this woman's life after he left her when he found out she was having their baby. And it's all about their second chance romance. This one was okay. The negative things I have to say about it is that I found it to be unrealistic in a lot of ways. One thing, she just lets this guy back into her life and lets her be the father of her baby when he's been gone for a pretty long time and doesn't think anything of it. Like, I would be really hesitant to let the guy who left me and my baby back into our lives. I would at least give it some time, but she's like, alright. It just kind of seemed kind of weird to me. And one thing that really didn't make sense is the growth and development of the baby. So the baby is 3 months, but she's already talking and like pointing to things, and I'm not a mother. I have never raised a child before, but I can guarantee that a 3-month-old baby would not be talking or like pointing to things and to indicate that they want something. Like, 3 months old aren't intelligent enough to do that. That didn't make sense to me. And also in this one, the girl thinks that she has had her stitches from her C-section ripped open, but at 3 months, shouldn't the stitches be healed by then? I'm pretty sure they should be. So I didn't get that. Like, she shouldn't have the actual stitches anymore. She should just have a scar. That was weird, and it just kind of felt like not enough research was put into it because of that, so that was kind of distracting. What I did like is that I thought the romance was sweet, and I liked seeing this guy grow to become a father and accept his role into this baby's life. That was cool to see, but there were a lot of negatives that I didn't really like about it. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to Rolling the Dice by Alessandra Tor. This one is about a woman who gets with this guy's best friend to get revenge on this guy because she was in love with him, but he got married, so she wants to like get revenge on him. But she actually starts to develop feelings for this guy's friend. Oh boy, this one. I did not like it. Sadly, it was so painfully underdeveloped. This one is just all straight up sex and no love. And that's not the kind of thing that I like reading. Like, I love steamy books, and sometimes I do actually read erotica. And you can tell because I've been listening to this podcast. But I don't like when it's just only sex and no actual relationship or connection between the characters, at least one that I can tell. And what makes it worse is that these two characters confess their feelings for each other at the end of the book when we only get their sexual relationship. I did not buy their love at all. I found it weird. Had this only been a story where these two just have sex and never love each other, I would have been totally fine with that. But the fact that they professed their love at the end of the book was so weird. It didn't make sense. The only thing we listened to were these two having sex. So like, why do they love each other? They never indicated that they love each other, and the sex scenes were so cringy. I just felt like I was listening to a straight up porno throughout the whole thing. It made me feel so uncomfortable. So yeah, I did not like this one at all, and I actually am really disappointed because I've heard such great things about Alessandra Tor, and I had been wanting to read one of her books for a long time, but this one just, oh no, I did not like it. However, I will still give her books a try because I am intrigued, but this one did not work for me, and I gave it 1 star. And then I read How to Love by Katie Cotugno, which I really loved. This one is about a girl named Rena whose baby's father mysteriously vanished one day, leaving her to care for their baby by herself. But then he comes back into town and tries to make things right by being there for her and their daughter, and this one is all about them falling in love again. One thing I didn't love is that there was some cheating in this book, and I hate reading about cheating. I hate cheating so much. So whenever it's in a book, usually I'm not that happy about that, but that was very, very minuscule in comparison to all the great things I found in this book. It was so heartfelt and emotional. I loved Rena as a main character. She is so strong, having to be a teen mom, which I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine being pregnant right now, and I'm like 22. Being a mom at 16 it's just the craziest concept to me. So the fact that she went through it and she handled it in such a mature way is just so strong of her. So I really liked seeing her journey through being a teen mom and having to raise a baby all by herself. I love this romance. It was so sweet, and I love the fact that they were so flawed. Like, their relationship between Rena and Sawyer, who is her baby's daddy, is so imperfect, but that just makes it all the more realistic. Like, there are some pretty problematic elements of their relationship, but these things happen with couples in real life, and especially it seems like these types of things happen between two young parents in real life, and so I did find that it was really realistic in that way, so I appreciated that. It's just a really sweet book that got me all teary-eyed, and it'll definitely stick with me. Going into this book, I did not expect to love it as much as I did, but I really enjoyed it, and I'll for sure have to check out more of Katie Cotugno's books. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to Mated to the Reaper by Alexa Riley, and this is the last and latest book I've listened to from the Read Me Romance podcast. This one is a paranormal, and it follows the Grim Reaper, and he is sent to kill this girl who is a vampire. She is dying because she has not found her mate, and she's running out of time, and when you don't find your mate, you start to die, which is pretty terrifying. But when the Grim Reaper shows up, she is instantly better because it turns out that he is her mate. So this is all about their love story. I really love the concept of this one, of a vampire finding out that the Grim Reaper is her mate, and the Grim Reaper was sent to kill her, but like they both fall in love with each other the first moment they see each other. That was just such a cool concept to me, and I felt like it was delivered really well. I love fated mate stories. I have just recently gotten into reading fated mates paranormal books, and I found that I really love them. Like, I hate insta-love, but the one exception is when it comes to fated mates. That's like the only reason for me that you can get away with insta-love is when you make them fated mates, because in that way it does make sense because they were meant to be in love. So love at first sight with fated mates is okay with me. And I really loved Grimm's dedication and love for this girl. He is so protective over her and treats her like a princess. It's just really sweet. So I love this one, and it is one of my favorite audiobooks that I have listened to from the podcast. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read a book that I never thought I was actually ever going to read, but I ended up picking it up, and that is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. I picked this one up during the Buzzword Readathon because it fit the challenge for that readathon to read a book with Y in the title, so that kind of finally gave me a reason to read it. So I gave it a shot and thought it was okay. This is a pretty popular one, so I'm sure most of you know what it's about, but if you don't know, it is about this boy named Clay who receives a package from a girl who has recently died from suicide. And in this girl Hannah's package is tapes where she tells the story of what drove her to suicide, and each person who receives this package has something to do with her suicide. So it follows that whole story. As you can tell, this one is really triggering. It has some pretty deep topics, so if you are triggered by suicide, definitely stay away from this book because it deals with that so much. That's the main topic of this book, so it's very heavy. Don't expect a light story going into this one. But anyway, starting with what I didn't like. So although every person has reasons to be depressed, and pretty much every reason is valid, I felt like Hannah's reasons for killing herself were kind of shallow to me personally, and the final straw for her killing herself I found to be kind of problematic because it made it seem like she was trying to make this thing happen to her so that she'd have a reason to kill herself, and that didn't really sit right with me. I didn't like that. But what I can appreciate about this book is some of the themes that it brings out. One of them being that we should be mindful of how we treat others and what we say to them, because you never know what someone is going through. One little thing can really set them off and make them go into a depression. So we have to be mindful and just be nice to one another. Like, don't bully. I hate bullying so much. So I liked how this book really made me think and made me understand how important it is to just be nice to one another, because you don't know what someone is going through and what can lead them to do the unthinkable, which is kill themselves. It also shows the sad reality that you can't change the past. While Clay is listening to these tapes, he's starting to realize there are things that he could have done to help this girl, help save her, but it's too late. And that's just, it's sad, but it's so realistic. There are some things that we have gone through that we feel like we should have said or done to someone to help them feel better, that it's just too late now. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. There were problems I did have with it, but I, again, really appreciated the themes that it brought to light. And I have been watching the Netflix TV show, and so far it is way better than the book. The TV show actually goes into more detail than I feel like the book did. It's way more interesting, so I'm really enjoying the show more than the book, actually. I would still recommend to give the book a try, though, if you are okay with reading about suicide and it's not too hard to read for you. I would recommend to try it out. And then finally, the last book that I read in March is Onyx by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is the second book in the Lux series. This one was a reread for me. I am rereading this series in order to refresh my memory on it so that I can review all the books, because I really want to review the books in this series because it's one of my favorite series. Unfortunately, this is my least favorite book in the series. I have quite a few problems with it. One thing is that the main character, Katie, makes so many stupid decisions in this book, and it infuriates me. So many of her decisions make zero sense, and they really get her into trouble. And I also didn't like how Damon was so controlling and overprotective of Katie. He does not allow her to make a lot of decisions by herself, and I found that really irritating. But I did like how action-packed this book was. It has just as much action as it did in the first book, and I also love the developing romance between Katie and Damon. It is so beautiful and just so cute. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, gave it 4 stars the first time, so I'm sticking with that. So those are all the books that I read in March, and this is a super long video, but I am not done yet. I want to do my statistics because I haven't done stats in a long time in my wrap-ups, but I really want to start doing them again. I've stopped doing them because I felt like my wrap-ups have been so long that it's been like too long to do one, but I don't really care. I still want to do that. I just love looking back on how my reading went for that month, what I accomplished, what my stats were, so let's just do it anyway. So for page count, I read approximately 4,709 pages. Some of the audiobooks from the Read Me Romance podcast don't have page numbers because they're audiobooks, so I can't say for sure if that's accurate, but I rounded up some of the short stories to 30 pages since that's the average to what these short stories were. So I approximately or estimately read 4,709 pages. 3 of the books I read were released in 1999, 3 were in 2000, 1 from 2004, 1 from 2006, 1 from 2007, 1 from 2011, 4 from 2012, 1 from 2013, 1 from 2014, 1 from 2016, 8 from 2018, and 4 from 2019. For genres, I read 3 romances, 9 paranormal books. I read a lot of paranormal in March, 14 erotica. Those were all stories that were part of the Read Me Romance podcast. Even though those are primarily romance books, I count them as erotica because these stories are like so smutty. It should just be titled the Read Me Smut podcast instead of romance. It's really misleading in that way. I read 1 hysterical romance, 1 thriller, and 1 contemporary. I read 11 novels, 12 short stories, and 6 manga. 12 of the books I read were young adult books, 1 was a new adult, and 16 were adult books. I read 13 books that were part of a series and 16 standalones. I don't think I've ever done this category before, but I think I want to start doing it. It's going over the series that I've started this month, completed or DNF'd. So I thought it'd be cool to kind of mention that. So I started 5 series this month. I continued with 1 series, and I DNF'd 1 series. I reread 10 books this month. Most of them were a part of the Fruits Basket series, but still, like, that's a lot. As for settings, I read 2 books that took place in Texas, 2 took place in West Virginia, 1 was from New York, 2 were in Washington, D.C., 6 took place in Japan, 1 was from the UK, 1 from Alabama, 1 from Missouri, 1 from Florida. 11 took place in the United States. I don't think they mentioned the cities they took place in, but they did take place in the US. And 1 took place in a fantasy world. 12 of the books that I read were by authors who I have read before, and 17 of the books that I read were by authors who I had never read their books previous to March. For ratings, I read 4 1-star books, 4 2-stars, 3 3-stars, 6 4-stars, and 11 5-stars. Now going into the readathons I participated in. I participated in 2 readathons. The first one is the Buzzwordathon Round 3, and the goal for this one was to read books with who, what, where, when, why, and how in the title. And I read 4 books during this readathon. For my what book, I read Whatever Life Throws at You. For where, I read This Is Where It Ends. For why, I read 13 Reasons Why, and for how, I read How to Love. And then I participated in my own readathon, which is Musicathon, which I failed miserably at. I failed at it the first round, and I failed at it the second round. So I'm really disappointed. The goal for this one is to read books that have to do with music, so I read 1 book during this readathon, and that is Onyx, and this one completed the challenge of to read a book where the author's first or last name is the same as a musician's first or last name. And now for reading challenges. I am participating in a yearly reading challenge, which is Romanceopoly, where you primarily focus on reading romance books. It's super cool. I've been enjoying participating in it, and since I haven't mentioned the challenges I've completed from this reading challenge, I'm going to mention all the challenges that I've completed so far, because I haven't been doing it because I've been forgetting, and I haven't been doing stats in a few months, so of course I haven't mentioned it. So far I've completed 6 challenges from this reading challenge. The first one is to read a YA romance, and so I read On the Fence by Casey West. The next one is to read a sweet contemporary romance, and for that I read Love, Life, and the List by Casey West. And the next one is to read a paranormal romance that has a band of warriors, and so for this one I read Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. And then in March I completed 3 of the challenges. The first one is to read a tearjerker, and so I read Hopeless by Colleen Hoover. Next is to read a historical romance that has a class disparity, and for that I read Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Kleypas. And then the last one is to read a paranormal romance with fated mates. So I read Lover Eternal by J.R. Ward. I will leave a link to the website for Romanceopoly in case you want to check it out. It is really fun. I've been enjoying doing it. So those were my statistics for March, and I'm going to leave off this video here because I'm sure it's gotten really long, even though I split up this wrap-up into parts. It's just, I can't help it. My wrap-ups just get so long because I always have so much to say. So if you have been sticking around for this long of the video, then thank you so much. That means a lot. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books that I've read. Did you like them? Did you hate them? I would love to know. And if you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below for more bookish related videos. Also, be sure to follow me on social media. Those links will be in the description box. I upload 2 to 3 times a week, so I'll be back really soon. Bye!